All right, for those of you on the stream, uh, I heard the broadcast at K Talk stop, Alex Jones, and now something else is playing in the background, and I'm not sure what it is. So, for those of you who are listening on the stream now, I was going to go through some of the Trump's 20-point Gaza peace plan. There's several things to talk about. I was watching right up to a couple of minutes ago his address to the military elite at Quantico, and I thought it was supposed to be the esprit de corps, to make sure that we're all happy on the same page and that we're all moving in the same direction. And I don't know, it was all self-congratulatory. Just talking about, and in fact, he mentioned the Nobel Peace Prize, and somewhat rather cynically saying that the person that would win the Nobel Peace Prize would be the person who wrote the book about Trump winning the Nobel Peace Prize or something like that. It's very interesting. All right. So I want to talk about this 20-point Gaza peace plan real quickly because I think it's a setup. It's just a setup. If you paid any attention, and I know many of you did, to President or Netanyahu's address last Monday to the General Assembly, he made it very clear that there's not going to be a Palestinian state. It's not an option. It's not a matter of debate. There will not be a Palestinian state. And of course, he was speaking to the American delegation and the Israeli delegation because everybody else got up and left. As soon as he was announced to be the speaker, and of course, everybody knew in advance that he was going to be the speaker, it became apparent nobody was going to be there to listen to him. And so whenever he would say something that would generate an applause, you could hear a half a dozen, maybe a dozen hands out there applauding what he had to say instead of the entire assembly. And he made it clear, as I said, there's not going to be a Palestinian state. So, it looks like I might be broadcasting. Well, excuse me. So, real quickly, Trump's 20-point peace plan. Number one, Gaza will be de-radicalized, a terror-free zone that does not pose a threat to its neighbors. Number two, Gaza will be redeveloped for the benefit of the people of Gaza who have suffered more than enough. Number three, if both sides agree to this proposal, the war will immediately end. Israeli forces will withdraw to the agreed upon line to prepare for a hostage release. During this time, all military operations, including aerial and artillery bombardment, will be suspended, and battle lines will remain frozen until conditions are met for the complete staged withdrawal. Within 72 hours of Israel publicly accepting this agreement, all hostages, alive and deceased, will be returned. Number five, once all hostages are released, Israel will release 250 life sentence prisoners, plus 1,700 Gazans who were detained after October 7th, including all women and children detained in that context. For every Israeli hostage whose remains are released, Israel will release the remains of 15 deceased Gazans. Once all hostages are returned, Hamas members who commit a peaceful coexistence and to decommission their weapons will be given amnesty. Members of Hamas who wish to leave Gaza will be provided safe passage to receiving countries. Number seven, upon acceptance of this agreement, I know this sounds too good to be true. Number seven, upon acceptance of this agreement, full aid will be immediately sent into the Gaza Strip. At a minimum, aid quantities will be consistent with what was included in the January 19th agreement regarding humanitarian aid, including rehabilitation of infrastructure, water, electricity, sewage, rehabilitation of hospitals and bakeries, and entry of necessary equipment to remove rubble and open the roads. Number eight, entry of distribution and aid in the Gaza Strip will proceed without interference from the two parties through the United Nations and its agencies and the Red Crescent, in addition to other international institutions not associated in any manner with either party. Opening the Rafah crossing in both directions will be subject to the same mechanism implemented under the January 19th agreement. Number 9, Gaza will be governed. This is where this is this is the point where I went, I saw this one coming. All right, number 9, Gaza will be governed under the temporary transitional governance of a technocratic, apolitical Palestinian committee responsible for delivering the day-to-day running of public services and municipalities for the people in Gaza. This committee will be made up of qualified Palestinians and international experts with oversight and supervision by a new international transitional body, the Board of Peace, which will be headed and chaired by President Donald J. Trump, with other members and heads of state to be announced, including former Prime Minister Tony Blair, the same Tony Blair of the false Iraq War person. This body will set the framework and handle the funding for the redevelopment of Gaza until such time as the Palestinian Authority has completed its reform package program as outlined in various proposals, including President Trump's peace plan in 2020 and the Saudi-French proposal, and can securely and effectively take back control of Gaza. This body will call on best international standards to create modern and efficient governance that serves the people of Gaza and it's conducive to attracting investment. Number 10, a Trump economic development plan to rebuild and energize Gaza will be created by convening a panel of experts who have helped birth some of the thriving modern miracle cities in the Middle East. Many thoughtful investment proposals and exciting development ideas have been crafted by well-meaning international groups and will be considered to synthesize the security and governance frameworks to attract and facilitate these investments that will create jobs, opportunity, and hope for future Gaza. Number 11, a specific economic zone will be established with preferred tariff and access rates to be negotiated with participating countries. Number 12, no one will be forced to leave Gaza. Those who wish to leave will be free to do so and free to return. We will encourage people to stay and offer them the opportunity to build a better Gaza. Number 13, Hamas and other factions agree to not have any role in the governance of Gaza, directly, indirectly, or in any form. All military, terror, and offensive infrastructure, including tunnels and weapon production facilities, will be destroyed and not rebuilt. There will be a process of demilitarization of Gaza under the supervision of independent monitors, which will include placing weapons permanently beyond use through an agreed process of decommissioning and supported by an internationally funded buyback and reintegration program, all verified by the independent monitors. New Gaza will be fully committed to building a prosperous economy and to peaceful coexistence with their neighbors. 14, a guarantee will be provided by regional partners to ensure that Hamas and the factions comply with their obligations and that the new Gaza poses no threat to its neighbors or its people. Number 15, the United States will work with Arab and international partners to develop a temporary international stabilization force to immediately deploy in Gaza. The ISF will train and provide support to vetted Palestinian police forces in Gaza and will consult with Jordan and Egypt, who have extensive experience in this field. This force will be the long-term internal security solution. The ISF will work with Israel and Egypt to secure border areas, along with newly trained Palestinian police forces. It is critical to prevent munitions from entering Gaza and to facilitate the rapid and secure flow of goods to rebuild and revitalize Gaza. A deconfliction mechanism will be agreed upon by the parties. Now, I'm going to read the rest of these here. I just have to make a comment. You see what's going on here is the complete demilitarization of Gaza. No weapons. Once the weapons are all gone, tunnels are destroyed, munitions have been surrendered. Buyback. I guess the Gazans can get money for the weapons that they turn in from Hamas. And they will be defenseless. It doesn't say that, but that's what's coming. Number 16, Israel will not occupy or annex Gaza. As the IS, now this is in direct contradiction to what Netanyahu said a week ago. Israel will not occupy or annex Gaza. As the ISF establishes control and stability, the Israel Defense Force will withdraw based on standards, milestones, and timeframes linked to demilitarization that will be agreed upon between the IDF, the ISF, the guarantors, the United States, with the objective of a secure Gaza, Gaza that no longer poses a threat to Israel, Egypt, or its citizens. Practically, the IDF will progressively hand over Gaza territory it occupies to the ISF according to an agreement that they will make with the Transitional Authority until they are withdrawn completely from Gaza, save for a security perimeter presence that will remain until Gaza is properly secure from any resurgent terror threat. 17, here's one of the caveats. In the event Hamas delays or rejects this proposal, the above, including the scaled-up operation, will proceed in the terror-free areas handed over from the IDF to the ISF. An interfaith dialogue process will be established based on the values of tolerance and peaceful coexistence to try to change the mindsets and narratives of Palestinians and Israelis by emphasizing the benefits that can be derived from peace. In a perfect world, maybe. How well has that worked so far? Number 19, while Gaza redevelopment advances and when the PA reform program is faithfully carried out, the conditions may finally be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood, which we recognize as the aspiration of the Palestinian people. Once again, just to remind us, Netanyahu a week ago said there isn't going to be a Palestinian state. It's either going, he's on the map, it's either going to say Israel or Palestine. It's not going to say both. All right, the United States will establish a dialogue between Israel and the Palestinians to agree on a political horizon for peaceful and prosperous coexistence. Well, like I said, in a perfect world, that's really nice and sweet. Talk is cheap. Usually you can't get peace until one side has destroyed the other side, at least to the point of total surrender, submission, and then there's just one plan. And to the victor goes the spoils, but to the victor also goes the territory. And as Israel, while this is going on in Gaza, Israel, of course, is moving in on the West Bank, moving in troops, moving in forces, even into eastern Jerusalem, which is, that is a no-no. While at the same time, out the other side of the mouth, they're talking peace in Gaza. Now, after this was announced and made public, Netanyahu arrived late at the White House, and the scheduled 1.5-hour meeting between Netanyahu and Trump ran 3 hours. And as the joint press conference afterwards did not begin until almost 2:30, and I caught a part of it, you know, it's not really clear what it took to extract an agreement from Netanyahu. But apparently, President Trump was committed to securing Netanyahu's signature on his 20-point peace agreement. The text was then released by the White House, and it appears that there was somewhat of a wrestling match in the White House over this. Now, looking at this in the context of who is whose boss, is Netanyahu Trump's boss, or is Trump Netanyahu's boss? And as you look at the way things have come together, I think it's pretty clear that our dear President, Donald J. Trump, scared to death of Netanyahu. And so why is this taking place? Well, the PR, the White House needs the PR of ending another war, which I think the only thing left will be some war that's going on in sub-Saharan Africa, and the massive number of Christians who are being killed in Nigeria right now. And that's about it. Then the only thing left is the Ukraine. And the president has already turned his back on that. When he made those comments the other day that we'll give the Ukraine everything they need and blah, 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 and the missiles and blah, blah. And now they'll be able to fight to the conclusion of the war successfully and be able to take back all the territory that the Russians have gained. You know that, I mean, that's madness. It's just anybody who believes that, or anybody who believes the president the president doesn't believe that. He's just saying, he just turned his back. He just signed the death warrant for the Ukraine. Because now that there's no chance of any further negotiations taking place, NATO is gearing up for war with Russia. And remember, NATO is 75% America. All the Russians have to do, as Dr. Rose said, just send a dozen Orishniks into Kyiv and it's all over. It'll be done with. Which is kind of forcing the Russians to that point. Now, while that is still fomenting into a powder keg, you've got this situation here in the Gaza now with the 20-point peace plan, which is just all it's distraction. This isn't going to happen because you know what's going to happen. There will be a false flag. Oh, well, they'll start moving in this direction. People will start singing, "We're on our way to Tipperary," and "Happy Days are here again," and big celebrations, and talking about the fantastic New Year celebration coming up in a few months for the new Gaza. I like the way they call it, the new Gaza. And then there'll be some kind of a red flag, false flag, where they'll blame it on Hamas. Israel will completely drop the 20-point peace plan and move in with some very, very serious warfare to completely eradicate what they're not about to let walk away with full amnesty, which is part of the plan. Hamas on surrendering of their armament. And I didn't notice in here, maybe I read it, but I was paying attention. I don't see where the IDF surrenders anything, but Hamas has got to surrender everything. And then they get full amnesty in return, and they can stay if they want, or go to another country. Who you think Netanyahu and the IDF for 1 second is going to let these guys hang around? Well, anyway, I want to get to the press conference because of what didn't happen, and what didn't happen. I called it. There was a couple of people watching it with me at the same time, and as Netanyahu and Trump were making their closing remarks, I said, watch, they will deny questions. They're not going to take questions. Watch what happens here. And of course, we don't know for sure what Trump had to agree with Netanyahu to get Netanyahu to agree to this kind of a thing. But notably absent from this extensive description of the agreement was any mention of some of the key points of key issues of the 20 points that will be very difficult for Netanyahu to follow through with. The immediate delivery of food aid on the level of the January agreement. If you remember, the January agreement was 600 trucks a day. And that's part of one of the provisions here. Immediate food delivery to the Gazans. The continued presence of Gazans in Gaza, which is not what Netanyahu and the IDF want. They don't want Gazans in Gaza. They want Israelis in Gaza. They want the Gazans out of Gaza. How well did Netanyahu swallow that one? The ban of any annexation by Israel of any of the property of Gaza. Israel cannot do what they're doing to the West Bank. And while Netanyahu's agreement to Trump's plan was stated, contingent, of course, upon Hamas agreeing to all these points, Trump spent his time trying to make it appear that all his goals all along were just to get the hostages back, to disarm Hamas, to demilitarize Gaza, and to keep Hamas out of the governing of any future new Gaza. And then Trump placed a call to Qatar's prime minister. And I have his name here. Mohammed bin Abdulrahman bin Jassim bin Jaber Al Thani. And he had Nepal. He had this is just unbelievable that this took place. But Trump placed a call to the Prime Minister of Qatar and had Netanyahu apologize after a fashion for bombing Doha. When I heard that, I said, no, come on, that's the Sacramento Bee. This is satire. Netanyahu told Al Thani that Israel wasn't targeting Qatar, only terrorists. Translate that to peace negotiators. They weren't terrorists, they were peace negotiators. But Netanyahu called them terrorists. And that he regretted a Qatari getting killed. We're so sorry about that. Trump said that a formal trilateral mechanism for dialogue is going to be set up to deal with the security matters and to avoid future misunderstandings. Otherwise, Netanyahu, commenting on all of this stuff, added some rhetoric creating new conditions that weren't in the 20 points, which foreshadow his plan, of course, to find Hamas guilty of not abiding by the terms, allowing him to return to cleansing Gaza and to, as Trump said not too long ago, finish the job. So this is just window dressing. I don't believe there's any intent whatsoever on the part of Israel or Netanyahu to follow through with this. The Gazans trust Netanyahu to follow through on this about as well as they trust, as far as they can throw him. So Netanyahu says Israel will finish the job by itself, not only if Hamas rejects the deal, but also if they accept it and then things are done that counter Netanyahu's view of the deal. Trump said that he doesn't have time to continue to deal with the Middle East. Excuse me. It's kind of like what he said regarding the Ukraine. Just kind of turned his back on it. He's done with it. Well, it looks like he's done with it in the Middle East. Especially with this that he's going to be the chairman of the new Board of Peace. While Tony Blair didn't get that desired position, Trump said that Blair wanted to be on the board, and Trump said he would make it happen. Well, what would Blair be representing? What is it? Let me back up even further. What's the real value of the Gaza? This endless desert that is much more barren and empty and dry than we are here in Utah. And we're pretty dry here. A good portion of Utah is desert, if not half of it. What's the value there? What does the Gaza have that Utah doesn't have, besides Gazans? You're right, incredible gas and oil reserves. Keep that in mind for the new Gaza. How can the energy developing industries on this planet, who are already buying and selling offshore leases that belong to the Gazans, how can they get in there and develop this oil and gas if people are shooting at each other? They themselves will be shot. You can't have that. So you have to have a ceasefire. And you can't just have a ceasefire. As of 12:01 this afternoon, all hostilities will stop while we get together to have a peace talk. Then when your peace talk people are planning their peace talk, they get bombed by the very people that you're trying to have peace with from a missile that hits a residential area of Qatar and kills citizens, civilians, the one, apparently only one, besides the peace negotiators. What does that tell you about Israel's real intent? So as you step back and look at this thing from a wider point of view, it begins to be very obvious what's going on. And in the background is the incredible wealth of the natural gas and oil reserves, half of which are offshore in the Mediterranean. And they belong to Gaza. How do you take something from somebody and look good while you're doing it? So it's while it's no secret that Trump can be effusive, to say it politely. He seemed to be genuinely happy with the group that he's working with in pulling this deal together. And after thanking Netanyahu for agreeing to the plan, he called the Saudi king a phenomenal person. The Emir of Qatar and others, incredible people. And all the ones that are involved in negotiations, the King of Jordan, Turkish President Erdogan, the President of Indonesia, who Trump said somebody who is an amazing leader. Both the Prime Minister and the Field Marshal of Pakistan stated that they fully agreed, and Egypt's al-Sisi was, he said, Trump says, was just terrific. Then he returned to Netanyahu saying that he was very clear about his opposition to a Palestinian state, and I understand his opposition to various things, but we have this deal. He said Netanyahu is a warrior, and he doesn't know about getting back to normal life. Then there was a slight pause after I think he realized what he just said, and then he said of Netanyahu, he is a good man. Now, if Netanyahu remains in power, because they got elections coming up, Trump is going to have to ride herd on him day in and day out to make this historic peace deal actually function. But I think the press has this backwards. I think it's more Netanyahu who is riding Trump day by day by day. Okay, what time have we got? Oh, we're halfway through. So, in a world of utmost tension, where the, I want to make a comment on the Tomahawk delivery to Ukraine. Before I get into this commentary. Back 2 days ago, Vice President Vance publicly aired the possibility of Washington sending long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles to the Ukraine with a strike range of 1,500 miles, which easily brings Moscow into Kyiv's range of attack. Recently, Ukraine's acting president, Zelensky, had said the long-denied missiles were now the next step for the U.S. to put into Kyiv's hands. He just made that comment. And remember all the debate that was going on with Biden before over this issue. No missiles, then missiles are on, then no missiles, then missiles are on. So after Vance spoke on Fox News 2 days ago, White House Special Envoy Keith Kellogg, who belongs in a retirement center somewhere, was quoted by Reuters as pushing the matter even further down the road. Kellogg said this: I think reading what Trump has said, and reading what Vice President has said, the answer is yes. We're going to use the ability to hit deep. There are no such things as sanctuaries. Now, imagine the Russians hearing this. Yesterday, Kremlin spokesperson Peskov posed some very serious questions at his press conference about all this talk on the tomahawks. And he said this: "We heard these statements. We're carefully analyzing them because our military specialists are closely monitoring this." He said the question is the following: who can launch these missiles, even if they end up in the territory of the Kyiv regime? Can they be launched only by Ukrainians, or must it still be done by American military personnel? Who provides the targeting for these missiles? A very deep analysis is needed here. You notice how patient the Russians are, just over and over again. Peskov further noted that the effect of such a deployment would have, quote, even if this is the case, there is no panacea that can now change the situation on the front for the Kyiv regime. There are no magic weapons, whether it's the Tomahawk or other missiles. They will not be able to change the dynamics. What dynamics? I think it's this. I think it's what Putin said, a month ago, 6 weeks ago, when he said, we're scaling down the man-to-man warfare. We're just going to use artillery. Well, part of the artillery are the drones. And these drones, do you have a drone in your home? These little toy-looking things? When they're talking about drone warfare on the front line, they're not talking about these big, the global hawk stuff that carries and launches Hellfire missiles, although it does to some degree. What they're talking about are these little, the kind of drone you can go to Best Buy and buy one of those that you can, take up deer hunt scouting, and the other kinds of things you'd be using these drones for, because these things are loaded. They have a camera and have a very powerful grenade. And these things run down the enemy. I've talked about this before. So traditionally, on the front line, there's this battle line, and you've got the enemy on one side and the other enemy on the other side, shooting across these fields or launching artillery shells or whatever, mortars, occasional attacks, man-to-man, whatever. They don't do that now. They send in the drones. And the drones have a camera, and they have FLIR, forward-looking infrared. So they see them at night. In fact, they're easier to see at night sometimes because of their body heat. And they fly the drone right into the enemy person, and the proximity fuse goes off from the grenade and kills the target as well as anybody else that's standing around. Now imagine yourself on one side of the battle line fighting something like this. The absolute terror that this would bring to you. So as far as attrition is concerned, this has dropped the number of dead on the Russian side to almost nil, where on the other side it's still thousands a week. And most of these drones are coming from Iran. So Peskov, commenting on this further, said the president will deliver a fairly major speech next week. I guess that's this week. We will announce what it will be about as exactly when and where, but the week will be interesting. So, as I said there a few moments ago, in a world of utmost tension, where the division of the world to a certain extent was made clear by this, I think the General Assembly is still ongoing. I think it goes through, I wasn't sure if it ended yesterday, but if not, it ends today on the 30th. where it became very clear that the West is self-isolating. And the global majority clearly is no longer willing to sit silent about what's going on. So you can be sure the after effect of this meeting between Trump and Netanyahu is definitely a line in the sand. In any case, Gaza is obviously the key topic of that meeting was, and what is generally reported is that the framework to end this war, I mean, everybody wants the deal to go through because they want the horror to stop. Supposedly it's peace in the Middle East, not just Gaza, but the entire region, including whatever the fate of Hamas might be. But an Israeli senior official, when asked what he expects, says, well, it's too early to tell. And Hamas basically said they had not received any new proposals from the mediators, that negotiations have been halted since the failed assassination attempt on September 9th in Qatar. Because remember, most of those negotiators were not killed by that blast. So there are contradictory statements, but as the Times of Israel reported yesterday, Trump is planning in his press conference to express further details about how all of this is going to turn out. But Witkoff and Netanyahu met already for 2 hours before the president met with him, in the presence of Jared Kushner. So you kind of get an inkling of what direction that discussion must have been going in, because the president's son-in-law is the one who was pushing the Trump Riviera concept for the Gaza. Now, when you read through the 20-point peace plan, it kind of says, well, we're going to turn the water back on. We're going to give them food at the rate of 600 trucks a day. We're going to start clearing up the blown up, destroyed infrastructure, start building new stuff, and allow a life of peace to begin to emerge for the Gazans, the Palestinians in particular, which they haven't had in the 70 plus years of Israeli occupation. They've never been free to just come and go as they want, like you can in this country. And then all of a sudden, Netanyahu and the boys are just going to back down and let Hamas walk. Now, there's still a lot of different rumors coming out about all of this, even about the text and how the text is going to morph itself. Netanyahu was able to inject in the text the risking to lose the support of some Arab and Muslim nations, and that these Arab nations and the Palestinian Authority requested changes in the so-called Trump plan. For example, some of the words are changed, not saying Hamas will be disarmed, but saying Hamas will be asked to hand over weapons, little things like that. Well, you can imagine how well Netanyahu's going to accept that one. And so I think what can be said for sure is that the strategic alignments in the Middle East have clearly changed. And to what extent that is entering into the calculations about such an agreement also remains to be seen, but we should remember that what has happened as a major game changer in the meantime is the Saudi-Pakistan strategic pact, including nuclear weapons, as Pakistan is offering Saudi a nuclear umbrella. And there are other countries said to be open to join that list. Now, the Iranian military aide, Major General Rahim Safavi, who is the chief military advisor to the Supreme Leader Khomeini, said that Iran should participate in all of this. That would obviously be a complete game changer. And therefore, the situation remains very, very volatile, because a second war against Iran, which some people have predicted to be almost inevitable, as I was saying yesterday, almost surely before Christmas. If you would you know, that would be nixed by such an agreement unless you fully intend on going to World War III. Now, one element is that Russia is now, in the next several days, signing an agreement with Iran about the construction of several nuclear power plants. And this is part of the orientation, and several analysts have mooted that in the meantime, Russia and China have beefed up their security system of Iran very significantly. Unfortunately, what cannot be ruled out is that part of this deal is what was mooted by several sources, is that Blair may effectively, don't laugh, be made the governor of Gaza for the next 5 years, because that's one of the parts of the plan, to which Craig Murray, and many of you know him and you've seen his podcasts and his appearances on different podcasts. He was a former British ambassador to Uzbekistan, said that this is so sickening to be beyond belief, and one can only confirm that, he said. He said, and this was the point I was trying to make about Blair. He wasn't the butcher of Baghdad, but he had as much to do with the ensuing deaths of over 500,000 Iraqi children and several million Iraqi adults on the false claim of weapons of mass destruction. And in fact, there are those who allude to the idea that it was Blair who finally pushed George Bush Jr. into doing what he did, along with Colin Powell and his lies before the General Assembly. And now it's possible that the same beast man could end up as the governor of Gaza. That's like, you know, Jesus in his trial before the Sanhedrin, marshaled there by Caiaphas, not having the power of life and death, so they had to go to Pontius Pilate to get the order of capital punishment against Jesus. But imagine Caiaphas standing in the position of Pontius Pilate, and Jesus is brought before him. To me, that's like Tony Blair as the governor of Gaza. Craig Murray said this about Blair. Killed 1 million Iraqis on the basis of lies about weapons of mass destruction, who has made hundreds of millions of pounds through PR services to dictators, whose Tony Blair Institute has drawn up the Gaza Riviera plans for Trump. In any reasonable world, this would be impossible. The degeneration of Western society is profound. There are no ethics in play beyond the dominance of power, wealth, and greed. Blair manages to embody these in just one person. So let's see what happens out of that. And in the meantime, Russia is not only making a nuclear agreement with Iran, they're presently having atomic agreements with 70 countries, and they're hoping to add 10 more. After the current World Atomic Week with Rosatom, the nuclear agency in Russia. Basically, that's very useful. We'll know more before the end of this week how the Middle East is going to respond to this. But for hundreds of nuclear power plants around the planet. Now, the other major front, which is really heating up in a very kind of hair-raising way, is this situation between NATO and Russia. And this whole whipped up hysteria about the drones and the fighter jets violating airspace and all of this nonsense, which each one of them has been denied by Russia as having taken place. But that doesn't prevent them from insisting on it. So NATO also had a two-day meeting with the defense chiefs in Riga, Latvia, to discuss military deployments within the alliance, always with the pretext of the worrying threats of the Euro-Atlantic security and stressing how important the presence of NATO in the Baltic nations is and so forth. So now Baroness Manningham-Buehler, who was the head of MI6 from 2002 to 2007, says that she agrees with Fiona Hill that the United Kingdom is already at war against Russia. Through cyber attacks, espionage, covert operations on British soil by the Russians, she says this is all proof of that. And then various NATO countries, including Germany, have now taken the decision to protect Denmark against Russian drone intrusions at the moment when the EU foreign and defense ministers are meeting in Copenhagen. So this is all part of the hysteria being stirred up. But the more earnest side to all of this is the very severe warning from Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov that Germany is going for a military buildup reminiscent of Hitler's policies to dominate Europe. Lavrov said this: "It's not just militarization. There are clear signs of a re-Nazification." Why is this being done? Well, probably the same goal that Hitler had, to dominate all of Europe and to try to inflict strategic defeat on the Soviet Union. Now, this needs to be taken very, very seriously. I mean, being German and sitting in Germany, if you can imagine this. You're a German who is reasonably awake, more awake than Americans are with their own governmental subterfuge. But a German reading the newspaper this morning about this kind of stuff going on. And you read this and you say, oh, this is crazy, this is exaggerated. But then when you look at the substance of it, that Merz is actually saying all these things, and if the Russians perceive it that way in the history of Napoleon and the Nazis' incursions into Russia, the consequences of it, whether it's exactly true or whether you can say exactly it's this way or that, the fact that the Russian government is saying this should be a concern to everybody who is not completely dissociated from reality, that it should be taken extremely seriously. Oh, excuse me. And the fact that all these statements are being made about the inevitability of a coming war with Russia. The need to be war ready by 2029, as Pistorius, the defense minister, says. The limitless military spending that's going on right now that's shutting down social programs in Germany. I mean, you would think that would be enough to make the average German reading that in the paper this morning for the blood to freeze in their veins. Because you've got this idea to contain Russia. And to do that, you have to shoot down these Russian fighter jets that they keep warning are flying into airspace outside of Russian airspace. And that Article 5 of NATO would have to be called upon. And that should really be an extreme warning sign that Germany, if not all of us, are on the verge of catastrophe. I mean, if this insanity is not stopped, and then the fact that Trump, by reversing his statement on the Ukraine, which now means, according to several serious analysts, including the retired German General Kuyat and others, really means that the United States wants to disengage from the Ukraine. Leave the bill to be paid by the Europeans, including new military deals to export weapons from the United States to the Ukraine, but paid by the Europeans, and that all of that naturally means that Europe is going to be asked to pay the bill. The United States is going to sidestep out of this whole thing, but still very much a part of it because they're American weapons. That will make the American military-industrial complex happy, at the same making Trump look like a man after peace. Now, obviously, given the fact that the European armies are in no shape or position to fight a war conventionally with Russia, the fact that it would take years for the European armies to gear up to be able to even be halfway of a match for Russian conventionally, that leaves the ominous option that some people are rather sticking to their position, risking that the world may blow up in a nuclear war, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. This is all taking place in a moment of the absolute economic collapse of Germany, exploding energy prices, collapsing bridges, schools, hospitals, no investment in anything new because all the money is going to military buildup for the German Bundeswehr. Absolutely insane. And there are more reports now that rich people are investing in the private bankers, that there is a continuous warning that you should have at least food and water reserves for 10 days. That is the general information coming out of the social services of Germany now. Have food and water for 10 days. Do it now. Get it stored now. Which obviously is a complete illusion. I mean, I think I said private bankers. I meant private bunkers. I'm sitting here, how's a private banker going to? They're investing in bunkers. Remember when that same thing happened here a couple of decades ago? And we just went bunker crazy. And bunkers were being, it's probably not a bad idea. But you don't hear too much of that anymore. But we just, everybody that could afford a 10-foot bunker had one in their backyard. Now, a private bunker, maybe this could protect you if you had some kind of an explosion somewhere. But not if you have a nuclear bomb, where nuclear radiation will be killing hundreds of thousands more people than the effect of the explosion. Modern nuclear warheads are anywhere from 100 to 550 kilotons, which is 30 times the destructive power of Hiroshima. And if you would throw a 20 kiloton bomb on a big city, the numbers are it would immediately kill 150,000 and several hundred thousand later through radiation. And if you would throw a 550 kiloton bomb, you would be talking about millions of human beings dead in seconds. Entire cities eliminated. The rest of the people who survived it would have severe burns, destroyed infrastructure, destroyed hospitals, no more medical supply because the doctors would be dead. So these people are playing with something, and I think it's what Ted Postel, and I've quoted him many times, and also the various videos that were made about the case of nuclear war. We must really people are really insane. They have gone completely bonkers in Germany. That's all I can say. Now, Lavrov, who made this very sharp attack on Germany in his UN speech, also had 35 meetings on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. And they keep saying that they have to keep the momentum generated by the Alaska summit between Putin and Trump, so the Russians are continuously talking about keeping up the perspective of having a normal relationship with the United States. And this is very important because many of the commentators out there have completely given up on Trump. I think most of the personalities who show up on Judge Napolitano's podcast have given up on Trump. In fact, they're now calling him Biden too. Because he's gone over, it's a fact that now Yermak, who's the cabinet chief for Zelensky, said what caused Trump's change in mind overnight, it seemed like in a matter of hours, was his discussion that he had with King Charles III, mind you. Even aside from the dinner where Charles was able to convince Trump that Ukraine can win. So I don't know if that's completely true. That's the word out there on the street. But I think we should go by the fact that the Russians are still carefully, not exuberantly, but they still think they can keep the option of normalization with Trump alive. So that's an important strategic factor here. Now, important also is that Michael Flynn, oh my goodness, it's 8:57. You know, the very short-termed national security advisor of Trump in his first administration, reiterated his warning that Trump needs his own operations center to provide him with his own reliable intelligence, operating in parallel with the Pentagon and CIA, but his own intelligence center. I thought that's what Tulsi was. So Kirill Dmitriev, head of the Sovereign Fund of Russia, who was also present in Alaska, endorsed this assessment of Flynn, saying that such an initiative would be valuable at a time when disinformation from the deep state and globalists seeks to derail decisions critical to global security and prosperity. And in the meantime, you saw, it's turned out, it's finally coming out public, that the FBI on January 6th had 300 plainclothes agents deployed in the crowds. So more is going to come out on this one, you know, so that Trump can set every one of those poor people free that were imprisoned. Now they know from internal review of the FBI, 300 plainclothes FBI people as a part of that demonstration that morning. Well, I got a lot more. I haven't even got to China or Africa yet, but we're out of time. K-Talk is going to be going to the news here really quickly. I'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. with a health program and a brand new product out from Standard Process for the heart that I started taking it this morning myself. And I will get into greater detail about that tomorrow. But I do appreciate the opportunity of being a part of the K-Talk lineup in my 31st year of doing that now. And I don't take it lightly. I don't take it for granted. I'm happy to be a part of this. I really am. So you keep your wits about you. Study this stuff for yourself. Don't accept anything that I've told you just because I said it. My job is to get you to think. I don't think if you think orthodox or heterodox, just that you think, that you keep your mind open and you consider possibilities, and always consider the possibility you might be dead wrong. And look for the arguments that would prove you're wrong, that may actually underscore and strengthen your belief in your concepts and precepts that are in fact true. But never stop examining and re-examining your own constructs in your mind. So you will be far less fooled, swayed, and deceived by the powers that be. All right, I don't see the news cutting in, but I have got to go. So I'm going to end my transmission here at K-Talk and bid you a fond adieu. I will be back tomorrow. And for those of you on the stream, I hope this has been a decent program for you today. Please like and subscribe. I say that because I'm supposed to say that. I don't know what our numbers are up to yet, but on the health show, we're over 800, well on our way to 1,000. And I will see you streamers tomorrow. So thanks for being a part of the show. I really appreciate and respect you. And don't hesitate to add to the show. There is a place here to comment or make suggestions. I'll see all of you tomorrow as well.